Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here with another book recommendation. This one is My Backyard History book, written by David Weitzman, illustrated by James Robertson. This is a high recommend if you have kids or if any of your family members are kids, give them this book. Even if you're an adult, I think the assignments and the ideas in this book are excellent and they illustrate something I think is important about being an artist and doing creative projects, and that's being diligent and organized with your time. I've said on Twitter before that I tweeted, I haven't experienced boredom in years, and the reason I tweeted that out is it gets to something I think is very important about being a creative person and having good artistic habits, and that's using your time well. When I was a little kid, I'd get bored and I'd want someone to entertain me because I was a snotty little kid and I didn't have a good attitude, right? When you have a good attitude about life, what you realize is that there's so many things to learn about in life that you can't, one lifetime isn't enough to learn and do everything, which could either make you neurotic and sad about life, or it could actually get you excited and help you realize that by using your time intelligently, you can produce excellent research, you can produce excellent works of art and excellent stories. And history is really important to curating your imagination. That's something I talk about again and again. Feeding your imagination good stuff so that when you sit down to draw or write, you have good stuff in your brain and not just copies of copies of copies of the same few TV cliches over and over and over again. And nonfiction and history informs the person who uses their imagination to tell fantastical stories. You want something of real life to resonate with whatever nonfiction story you tell. So looking at backyard history, one of the reasons I'd really want kids to have this and read this, and even adults, is if a child read this book and did all the creative assignments in this book, they'd essentially get a working knowledge, not just of being an amateur historian and doing family history and genealogy projects, but they'd actually get a working knowledge in a whole lot of areas where I think they'd have good life experience, good work experience that they could apply in multiple ways. So, the opening chapters, you learn a bit about the history of names and the meanings of people's surnames, and then it shows kids how to make a journal of their life and put everything on a timeline. I think that's something important for artists and writers to do, because you're collecting things you remember about your early life that might fade down the memory hole if you don't record them. I can't summarize all the projects because there's dozens of great projects in this, but just to give you an idea of all the things you could learn about, you could learn a bit about geography during these projects. You could learn two different ways of doing family trees, horizontal family trees or vertical family trees, and the kinds of notations that are used to distinguish, boys and girls, were they married or not married, siblings. You could learn things like the culture of your parents or grandparents' generation, photography practices. So a little kid could read and understand this book and come away with a working knowledge of traditional studio photography, how to care for and preserve negatives and antique types of photographs, how to do their own photography, how to organize information and catalog it and keep straight a lot of dense information, how to do interview skills, how to introduce kind of a conversation with your family about what was it like as a kid, and not being awkward about it, but just being casual about it. Casual interview skills, asking good follow-up questions, were objects, antique objects and inventions, and how to find information on them in Sears catalogs or phone books. It's just giving kids tons and tons of ideas of where to go to find interesting information. The cemetery. I love to go to the cemetery to photograph because there's lots of information about the people who lived in an area. You'll sometimes see little stories, the graves of children when child mortality rates were much higher. The cemeteries are a part of our history, and sometimes someone will find a really funny tombstone like "Here Lies Harry Potter" or something, and in order to find those cool things, someone has to go out and explore a bit and try to find that information. How streets and towns develop over time, how to play a little family game at Thanksgiving or something using a Sears catalog by having people try to guess the prices of antique products and items and fashion. planes and trains and interviewing old people at the park, understanding architecture, identifying major architects and styles of architecture, how to perform a rubbing. That's useful for printmaking, knowing how to do that, and identifying architecture and decoration from the arts and crafts movement before the Industrial Revolution kind of standardized everything. How to search a junkyard for good materials and good items. How to build a 3D model of a house or an antique building. So much good stuff. Pretty much a kid who read and did this book would come away with a lot of great competency and life skills, able to build stuff, able to work with his or her hands, able to write and organize information. It's so much broader than I don't want to dig on the internet and TV too much. Kids these days and their iPhones and their video games, but there is a value to being able to do these various kinds of things, because it teaches you how to be just competent, not be an idiot who's on your iPhone all day and the only thing you know is one type of knowledge. And for storytellers particularly, I think this would be a fantastic book for you to look at. The illustration style itself, let me talk about that, because that's interesting. James Robertson's style is very loose and cartoony. They're like doodles, but I think it's the perfect style for this type of book because it's adding some whimsy and humor to the text, and it complements nicely the photographs and the realistic information. So what that means is, as you're reading it, a child can understand the difference between one of Robertson's illustrations and David Weitzman's text and photographs. It helps promote clarity through contrast. So you look at the historical photograph and then you look at the drawing of the little kid collecting the photographs, and you're never confused about what's an illustration and what's a document of a box of photography or a box or a realistic diagram of how to use a camera. It's fantastic. So I really love this book. I really highly recommend it. I'm not sure how widely available it is. When's it come from? It's originally published in 1975, and even though we're in a digital age and a lot of family historians are using the computer to document and archive information now, this is still really important information if you want to be a family historian, which not everyone wants to be their family historian, but these are at least things I think an artist and a writer should know how to do so that they're good at collecting information about time periods that they want to write stories about or write comics about. So very high recommendation for this book. Give it to kids, read it yourself, give it to future sons and daughters or nephews and nieces. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Catch you later.